Clint Eastwood walked into a grocery store to buy coffee. That was it. No red carpet, no cameras, no bodyguards, no big entrance. Just a quiet Tuesday morning, a baseball cap pulled low, a newspaper under his arm, and a man trying to get in and out before the day got busy. But 30 feet in front of him, an elderly veteran was standing at the register counting coins for a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a gallon of milk, and a small pack of lunch meat. He was short by less than $3, and when the cashier said, "Sir, you'll need to put something back," the whole mood of that checkout lane changed. What happened next didn't just pay for one man's groceries. It turned an ordinary store into something nobody in that line would ever forget. And the most powerful part of this story isn't even the money. It's what the veteran said after he realized who had helped him. Stay with me, because the ending hit even harder than the moment itself. It was September of 2018 in Carmel, California. The morning rush had started but hadn't peaked yet. Safeway was doing what grocery stores do every day, carts rattling across the tile, scanners beeping, coffee brewing somewhere near the bakery section, people half awake and moving on autopilot. Some were grabbing fruit, some were buying things for dinner, some were just trying to survive another Tuesday. Nobody expected to witness anything memorable. Clint Eastwood moved through the aisles like any other customer. Jeans, simple shirt, worn cap, nothing flashy. He picked up a coffee, grabbed a newspaper, and headed toward the checkout lanes. If anyone recognized him, they kept it to themselves. In a town like Carmel, seeing Clint around wasn't impossible, but even then, most people didn't stare. He had a way of carrying himself that made attention slide right past him. Quiet, controlled, almost invisible if he wanted to be. He chose lane 3 because it looked fastest. Only one person stood in front of him, an elderly man, thin but upright, wearing a faded Army veteran cap and a brown jacket whose sleeves had frayed at the cuffs. His basket was small, not because he forgot things, not because he was in a hurry. Small because every single item in it had clearly been calculated. Bread, eggs, milk, lunch meat, just enough food to get through a couple of days. The kind of groceries you buy when you're not shopping for comfort, you're shopping for survival. The cashier was a young woman, maybe early 20s, named Ashley according to the tag pinned to her apron. She scanned the items with practiced speed and said, "That'll be 1873. The old veteran nodded, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a wallet so worn it looked softer than leather should be. He opened it. No bills, just coins. That tiny change in the air, the kind most people miss, happened right there. He had expected more. You could see it in his face before he said a word. His eyes narrowed, his mouth tightened. Then he gave the smallest shake of his head, almost embarrassed at himself. "I thought I had enough," he murmured. He tipped the coins onto the counter and started counting. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, one by one, slowly, carefully, like every metal click against the counter was louder than it should have been. Ashley waited, at first professionally, then impatiently. Behind Clint, the line started growing. One customer looked at their watch. Another shifted their basket from one hand to the other. Somebody sighed. The veteran kept counting. 14, 15, 16. Then he stopped. He counted again, just to be sure. Same result. He looked up, and his voice dropped so low it almost disappeared beneath the scanner noise. "I'm short." Ashley glanced at the coins. "You're short by $2.47, sir. You'll need to put something back." It wasn't what she said. It was how routine it sounded. Not cruel, not loud, but flat, transactional. Like this happened enough that it no longer surprised her. The veteran looked down at the food. His gaze moved from bread to eggs to milk to the lunch meat. He didn't touch anything at first. He just stared, as if he was trying to decide which item mattered least, when all of them mattered. "The lunch meat," he said quietly. "Put that back." Ashley reached for it. Then the veteran stopped her. "Wait, how much is the milk?" $3.49. "And the bread?" $2.79. He nodded and did the math in his head, lips moving slightly, not dramatic, not begging, not trying to work an angle, just an old man trying to solve a humiliating problem in public with dignity still intact. His hands had started trembling now, Not a lot, just enough. And that was the moment Clint really looked at him. Not just at the cap, not just at the basket, at the whole picture. This wasn't someone being careless. This wasn't someone trying to buy beer and cigarettes without enough cash. This was a man trying to decide whether milk or protein mattered more for the next 2 days. The veteran swallowed hard. I'll keep the bread and eggs. Put the milk and the meat back. Ashley started voiding the items, and then Clint stepped forward. He set his coffee and newspaper behind the veteran's groceries and said, in that unmistakably calm, steady voice, "Ring it all up together." Ashley looked up. "Excuse me?" "All of it," Clint said. "His groceries and mine. One transaction." The veteran turned immediately. "No, sir. I can't let you do that." Clint didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a speech. He simply said, "You're not letting me do anything. I'm buying coffee. Your groceries happen to be in front of mine. That's all." There was something about the way he said it that changed the entire exchange. He wasn't rescuing the man. He wasn't performing kindness. He was protecting his dignity. The veteran shook his head. "I can't pay you back. I didn't ask you to. But, sir, you should take your groceries," Clint said, "and have yourself a decent morning." Ashley looked between them, still unsure, then rescanned the milk and the lunch meat, the total updated. She added Clint's coffee and newspaper. $22.57, she said. Clint took out his card and handed it over like this was the most normal thing in the world. No announcement, no smile for the room, no glance around to see who was watching. Just done. The card processed, the receipt printed. The veteran stood motionless like his body had not yet caught up with what had just happened. Then Clint looked at the man's cap and asked, "What branch?" The veteran blinked. "Army." "What years?" "Vietnam, 68 to 70, 8 to..." Clint nodded once. "Thank you for your service." That did something. You could see it land. Because up until that point, the veteran had been dealing with the embarrassment of not having enough money. But those 6 simple words shifted the moment. Suddenly, he wasn't just an old man holding up the line. He was a man who had served, a man who had carried something heavy long before he ever stood in this grocery store counting coins. Ashley handed the receipt across the counter. The veteran took it, then slowly lifted his eyes to Clint's face, really looked at him this time. The cap, the jawline, the voice. Recognition spread gradually, like a light turning on in stages. He stared. "Wait," he whispered. "Are you?" Clint gave the smallest nod. The old man's lips parted, but no sound came out for a second. "You're Clint Eastwood." "Just buying coffee," Clint said. And that should have been the end of it. It would have already been a good story if it ended there, but it didn't. Because the veteran's eyes suddenly filled with tears, and when he spoke, the entire lane went silent. "Your movies got me through nights I didn't think I'd survive." Nobody moved. Not Ashley. Not the people in line. Not even Clint. The veteran clutched the receipt in one hand like he needed something to anchor him. "When I came back from Vietnam," he said, voice shaking, "people didn't exactly welcome us home. You know that. We came back with things in our heads we couldn't explain. We were angry, tired, guilty, lost. A lot of us didn't talk about it because nobody wanted to hear it anyway." He paused, trying to steady himself. "But I'd watch your movies," he continued. "Those westerns, Dirty Harry, the way those men carried pain and still kept going. I know they were just characters, but when you're in a bad place, sometimes a character is enough to keep you from falling apart for one more night." By now, even the customers from the next lane were watching. Clint's expression changed. It softened in a way that was almost hard to catch unless you were looking for it. He said quietly, "You did the real hard part. I just pretended on screen." The veteran shook his head immediately. "No, sir. You gave people like me something to hold on to when there wasn't much left. You don't know what that means. If this is touching you already, keep listening, because the story hadn't even reached the part nobody saw coming." The veteran took a slow breath, then looked down at his coins still sitting on the counter. Ashley hadn't swept them away yet. Little piles of silver and copper, public proof of a private struggle. He gave a sad laugh. Funny thing is, I almost didn't come in today. I was sitting in my car trying to decide if I should wait until next week. But I had no bread left, no eggs. Nothing really. I kept telling myself it's only a few days, just make it work. Then I figured I had enough change. Turns out I didn't. No one interrupted him. He continued, I'm on disability, fixed income. Some months the numbers line up, some months they don't. Rent hits, utilities hit, prescriptions hit, and suddenly $2 feels like a mountain. Ashley looked down, because now this wasn't just about a delayed transaction. Now everyone could see what had really been happening in front of them. Not inconvenience, not slowness, survival. Then came the first twist. An older woman who had been standing behind Clint stepped forward and gently placed a folded $20 bill in the veteran's hand. For the next time the numbers don't line up, she said. The veteran immediately tried to give it back. No, ma'am, I can't. Yes, you can, she said, closing his fingers around it. My father served in World War II. Somebody helped him once. I never forgot hearing that story. Let me do this. Before the veteran could answer, a man in a business suit stepped up and pulled out his wallet. He added a 50. Then a mother with 2 young kids reached into her purse and handed over another 20. Then the teenage bagger, who probably made barely more than minimum wage, fumbled through his apron and found a 10. One by one, people who had been strangers 30 seconds earlier began stepping forward, quietly, quickly, without speeches, not to show off, to join in. The veteran's hand started shaking again, but now for a different reason entirely. Within 2 minutes, there was over $200 on the counter. Ashley covered her mouth. The man who had been embarrassed over $2.47 was now standing in front of a pile of help, so sudden and so sincere that he looked almost stunned by it. But then came the second twist. Ashley disappeared for a second, reached beneath her register, and pulled out a Safeway gift card. It's got $25 on it, she said. For next time. The veteran stared at it. The store's doing this? Ashley hesitated. Clint caught it right away. Because the store wasn't doing it. She was. She had paid for that card herself. The veteran seemed to realize the same thing. You don't have to do that. Ashley's eyes filled. I know. I want to. And just like that, the young cashier who had sounded impatient a few minutes earlier was crying at her register. Later people would say that was the moment the whole thing became unforgettable, because it showed how fast a person can change once they stop seeing delay and start seeing pain. The veteran, whose name everyone now learned was James Patterson, looked around at all of them in disbelief. I don't know what to say. Clint, still holding his coffee, answered first. Say you'll eat. A few people laughed through their tears. That broke the tension just enough for James to breathe again. But there was still one more moment, one final line, that made the entire store go dead quiet. James turned back to Clint, eyes red, voice raw, and said, You know what hurts most? It's not being broke. It's feeling invisible while you're broke. Nobody in that lane forgot that sentence, not then, not later, not ever, because everybody understood it instantly. The fear wasn't just hunger, it was being unseen. It was feeling like if you quietly slipped beneath the surface, nobody would notice. Clint stepped closer, just enough to make sure James heard him over everything else. You're not invisible, he said. Not today. Simple words, but sometimes the simplest words are the ones that rebuild a person from the inside. James nodded, but tears were running freely now. I've had days where I felt like maybe I made it this far just to become a burden. Clint's tone sharpened, not angrily, but with conviction. You served your country. You are not a burden. If anybody should be ashamed, it's a system that leaves veterans counting coins for groceries. That landed even harder, because it was true, and because nobody in the store could argue with it. For a few seconds there was no scanner noise, no cartwheels, no shuffling feet, just silence. Then Ashley quietly bagged the groceries. Bread, eggs, milk, lunch meat. The same items that had almost been split apart by poverty were now tucked carefully into 2 bags like something sacred. James took hold of the handles, but before he could leave, Clint asked, You parked close? James nodded. Near the front. Good, Clint said. Take your time getting there. James gave a broken little laugh. I don't think I've ever been told to take my time and meant it this much. If you're still here, hit like on this story in your own way, because moments like this deserve to be remembered, and trust me, we're not at the end yet. As Clint turned toward the exit, James suddenly called after him, Mr. Eastwood? Clint looked back. James lifted the receipt in one hand and said, I'm going to keep this. Clint gave him a small smile. Then I hope the coffee was worth remembering, too. People laughed again, softer this time. Clint headed out, and most people assumed that was the final image. Clint leaves, and the veteran goes home, and the crowd moves on. Story over. But the real ripple effect started after the doors closed behind him. Ashley told her manager everything. Not the celebrity part first, not even the money. She told him about the coins, the hesitation, the look on James's face when he had to choose between milk and meat, the sentence about feeling invisible. The manager listened, then did something unusual. He asked, Does he shop here often? Ashley nodded. I've seen him before, usually small baskets, always exact change. That afternoon, the manager made a few calls. By evening, employees at that store had quietly started putting together a small emergency fund for veterans and seniors who came up short at checkout. Nothing flashy, no sign on the door, no big PR campaign, just a discreet way to spare someone that moment of public humiliation. And that wasn't all. Some of the customers who had been there that morning came back later in the week, asking about James, not in a nosy way, in a worried way. They wanted to know if he was okay, whether he had family, whether someone was checking on him. Word traveled through Carmel the way meaningful stories do, not as gossip, but as testimony. There's an old veteran at Safeway. Clint Eastwood paid for his groceries. Then everybody joined in. Then the whole store changed. Soon people began recognizing James when he came in, not as that poor man, as James, the veteran with the quiet voice, the man from Vietnam, the one who always said thank you twice, the one who folded every receipt and tucked it carefully into his wallet. Employees started watching for him. If he looked tired, somebody offered to carry his bags. If he arrived near closing, someone made sure he didn't rush. If prices had gone up on something he usually bought, Ashley would sometimes point out a sale before he got to the register. No pity, just care. And James changed too. That may be the most beautiful twist in the entire story. Because generosity did not just solve his grocery problem for one day, it changed the way he walked into the store after that. His shoulders came up a little, his eyes met people's more easily. He stayed to talk, sometimes just for a minute, sometimes long enough to ask how Ashley's classes were going or whether the bagger ever finished saving for his first car. A man who had felt invisible started becoming part of a community. And then, a few weeks later, came another unexpected moment. James came through lane 3 again. Same cap, same careful shopping. Only this time, before Ashley could even greet him, he placed a small envelope on the counter. What's this? She asked. For the fund, he said. Ashley frowned. James, no. He smiled. It's $15. Don't argue. Last month, somebody helped me stand up straight again. Let me help the next person. Ashley later said she had to go to the back room after that because she started crying all over again. That's the thing about real kindness. It doesn't end where you think it should. It multiplies, quietly, persistently, person to person. Over the next few months, the Little Veterans Fund kept growing. Employees added to it. A couple of regulars contributed. Sometimes people who had heard the story but never even met James left money at customer service and just said, for whoever needs it. And James never forgot where it began. Whenever somebody mentioned Clint Eastwood, James would shake his head and say the same thing. He didn't make me feel helped. He made me feel human. That line spread almost as much as the story itself. Months later, James passed away peacefully in his sleep. When the news reached the store, it hit harder than anyone expected, because by then he was no longer just a customer who came in once a week. He was part of the place. Ashley cried in the break room. The manager put flowers near customer service for a day. Several regular customers asked about funeral arrangements. The bagger, now a little older and a little less shy, said, It feels weird that lane 3 won't be the same. More than 50 people attended James's funeral. Some were family, some were neighbors, some were people from Safeway, and a few were customers who had only met him because of that morning at the register. During the eulogy, James's nephew shared something that made everyone in the room tear up. He said, "Uncle James told me that on the day he met Clint Eastwood, he stopped feeling like his life had become an apology. He said for the first time in years, strangers looked at him and saw a man, not a problem." Then the nephew held up a folded piece of paper, the receipt, the same one James had saved. It was worn at the corners from being opened and refolded over and over again. On the back, James had written a sentence in shaky handwriting. "Today I was reminded that I am still here, and that still matters." That line broke the room. Even people who had promised themselves they wouldn't cry were wiping their eyes. When Clint heard that James had passed, he sent flowers. No publicity, no statement, just flowers and a short card. It read, "It was an honor to buy coffee with you that morning. Thank you for your service." Clint. Only Clint Eastwood could make a note like that sound simple and profound at the same time. Years later, people in Carmel still talk about that Tuesday morning, not just because Clint Eastwood was there. If this had only been about celebrity, the story would have faded. People would have remembered it for a week and moved on. They remember it because of what happened after. Because a man short $2.47 walked into a store feeling ashamed and walked out feeling seen. Because a cashier who began the morning impatient ended it transformed. Because strangers in a line stopped acting like a line and started acting like neighbors. Because one calm decision at a register sparked something bigger than charity. It sparked dignity, and dignity is different. Charity can be quick, dignity stays. That little fund for veterans kept helping people after James was gone, quietly, just the way he would have liked. Maybe not huge amounts, maybe not enough to solve every problem, but enough to cover the difference sometimes, enough to save someone from choosing which basic item to put back, enough to prevent one more person from feeling invisible for the price of a gallon of milk. And maybe that's the real reason this story sticks. Most people will never stand in a dramatic moment with cameras rolling and music playing. Most people won't get a movie-style chance to prove who they are. Real life usually gives us something smaller. A register, a delayed line, an old man counting coins, a split second where we decide whether we'll judge, ignore, complain, or step forward. That morning, Clint stepped forward, then everyone else did too. And for one ordinary Tuesday in a grocery store, people remembered what strength actually looks like. Not loud, not flashy, not performative. Just a quiet voice saying, "Ring it all together." If this story stayed with you, pass it on to somebody who needs the reminder that kindness still exists and dignity still matters. Drop a comment if you've ever seen a moment like this in real life, because those stories deserve to be heard too. And if you want more powerful stories that restore your faith in people, stick around, because the next one might hit even closer to home than this one.